The title of today's lesson is Bear, Gull, and Crow. Let's go over some vocabulary words before we begin. Our first word is bay. Say bay. A bay is an area of the sea that is enclosed by a deep curve in the coastline. Feast. Say feast. Feast means to eat a big meal. Rockweed. Say rockweed. Rockweed is a greenish brown rubbery seaweed that grows on rocks in coastal areas. And our last word is wading. Say wading. Wading means walking through shallow water. Do you know what type of food is shown in this picture? These are clams, a type of shellfish that lives in the ocean. Even today, clams are a common and popular food in New England. Clam digging and harvesting are important to the daily lives of Native American tribes in New England. Clamming is still important to the culture and economy of present-day New England. Have you ever eaten clams? I haven't. New England is a region located in the northeastern part of the United States. This part here is New England, this green part. This area borders the Atlantic Ocean and has many waterways, but it also has forests a little farther inland. The tribe that you will hear about today, the Wampanoag, lived in this area. I want you to listen carefully to this story about three characters named Gull, Bear, and Crow who lived near the Wampanoag tribe. Listen to find out about a type of food the Wampanoag like to eat. Bear, Gull, and Crow. So here we can see Bear, Gull, and Crow. Long ago, there were three animal friends who lived in a land of wild forests, green fields, and shining waters. Gull made her home in the marsh grass near the bay. A gull is a type of bird. Bear lived in a cave deep in the woods, and Crow had a nest in an old oak tree at the edge of a garden. Bear, Gull, and Crow often got together to visit and chat. One of the things they talked about was the upright walker beings who lived nearby. What do you think an upright walker being is? An upright walker is a human like you and me. These beings called themselves the Wampanoags. But the animals called them the upright walkers because they walked upright on two legs all the time and never flew. So the Wampanoag are another Native American tribe. The upright walkers lived in houses that they called wetu, built from bent saplings and tree bark. They could make fire just as lightning did when it struck a tree. They grew corn kernels planted in small earth hills. These kernels were sweet, crunchy nuggets that Crow loved to steal. They fished in the bay using nets, spears, hooks, and lines. The upright walkers also hunted in the forest with bows and arrows, so Bear was always very careful to keep his distance. One day, Gull said to Bear and Crow, "Today I saw some upright walkers wading in the bay." In this sentence, the word saw means that Gull used his eyes and his sense of vision. There was a man and a boy. They lifted many smooth rocks from the water and carried them into the forest. They said the rocks were for the Appanog. I wonder what an Appanog is. Crow thought hard for a minute. An Appanog must be an animal, he said, an animal that eats rocks. Can there be an animal bigger than I am? Said Bear. I want to see this animal. Tomorrow I will go and spy on the Appanog. Do you think Crow and Bear are right? Is an Appanog an animal? Let's listen to find out. The next day, Bear found the pile of stones. He hid behind the trees and waited. Before long, the upright walkers came. They dug a very shallow hole in the ground. Then they carefully laid the rocks into it and went away. Bear waited and waited, but the Appanog did not come to eat the rocks. Tired of waiting, Bear went to tell Gull and Crow what had happened. The upright walkers dug a hole and filled it with rocks, but the Appanog did not come. Leave it to me, said Crow. Tomorrow I will figure out what is going on. The next day, Crow perched in a tree near the rock pit. Soon the upright walkers returned. They collected lots of dry wood and piled it next to the pit. Crow flew hurriedly to find Bear and Gull. The upright walkers collected wood. They are going to build a weed-tube for the Appanog, said Crow. The Appanog will live in our forest in its own wooden house. Do you think Crow is right? Are they building a weed-tube? He thought for a moment, but what if it's not a friendly Appanog? Bear and Gull looked worried. The next morning at sunrise, as Gull was winging over the bay, she saw the upright walker man and boy on the beach. There was a girl with them too. Low tide had uncovered some wet sand that had been under water at high tide. The upright walkers were looking for little holes in the wet sand. From time to time, water shot up from these holes. They were the breathing holes of soft-shelled clams that lived under the sand. Gull watched as the upright walkers dug the clams out with long sticks. Some clams spit water even after they were dug up. Soon the upright walkers had filled a large basket with the clams. They waded into the shallow water and filled another basket with larger clams. Later on, Gull told Bear excitedly, "The upright walkers collected many clams. They said they were glad to have found so many clams for their Appanog. I hope the Appanog does not eat up all the clams and fish in the bay." Gull went on, "Next, those upright walkers gathered the rockweed that grows on the rocks in the shallow water. Rockweed is a type of greenish-brown, rubbery seaweed that grows on rocks in coastal areas." "The Appanog is going to eat the rockweed too," said Bear. "What will it decide to eat next?" Bear looked around. "Where is Crow? Wasn't he supposed to meet us here? Do you think the Appanogs eat crows?" No sooner had Bear spoken than he saw Crow flying toward them. "I saw the upright walkers in the cornfield," exclaimed Crow. "They picked baskets full of corn. They said it was for the Appanog today. The Appanog is coming today." Bear, Crow, and Gull looked at one another. "Let's go," said Bear, and lickety-split off they set for the rock pit. There they hid among the trees. Before long, some upright walkers started to gather. Then more and more came. There were men, women, and children, big and small, old and young. The upright walkers took the dry wood from its pile and laid it over the stones. One man started the wood burning. Others stayed by the fire and kept it going. They raked the burning wood so that hot ashes fell into the cracks between the rocks. Soon ashes covered the rocks, heating them up. The upright walkers laid rockweed over the ashes. Steam rising from the damp rockweed gave off a sharp smell of salt. The upright walkers placed heaps of clams on top of the rockweed, together with lobsters, corn, and potatoes. When all the food was loaded on, they covered it with more rockweed. Bear, Crow, and Gull sniffed the mouth-watering aromas of the food cooking. Now everyone fell silent as a very old upright walker stepped forward and said a prayer to the Great Spirit. He thanked the Great Spirit for the animals, plants, rocks, and trees. The other upright walkers joined hands in a circle and stood in silence. Then, as a flute and drum sounded, the upright walkers began to dance. When the dancing had ended, the old upright walker spoke again. "This is a fine day for our Appanog. The Appanog is a celebration, a time for our people to come together, to give thanks to the Great Spirit, and to feast on delicious food." Feast means to eat a big meal. Can you guess what the Appanog is yet? Is it an animal? So let the feasting begin. The rockweed covering was lifted off, and the upright walkers began to load their bowls with food. Bear, Gull, and Crow looked at one another. An Appanog was not a huge rock-eating animal with big teeth after all. An Appanog was a celebration where the upright walkers had a clam-bake feast, a mouth-watering, nose-tickling feast. How they wished they could leap out from their hiding place and join in. But what would the upright walkers think of having uninvited guests? Just then, a girl walked toward the hiding place carrying a bowl piled high with food. It was the girl that Gull had seen digging in the sand for clams. The girl laid the bowl on the ground. Before running back to join the other upright walkers, she called out, "To the birds and animals who share the forest and the bay with us Wampanoags, may you enjoy sharing our Appanog, our clam-bake feast." And that is just what Bear, Gull, and Crow did. So the Appanog was not a scary animal that was going to eat rocks and eat other things in the bay and the forest. It was a clam-bake feast, a time for the Wampanoags to have a big feast and eat clams and other things that they got from nature. So that is the end of our story for today. You can go ahead and answer the questions now.